They say every family has a favorite. In my family, it was never me. I was the forgotten one. The one they didn't believe in. My sister? She was perfect. And me? Just a mistake. But years later, in a courtroom full of strangers, a judge looked at me and said, "You're the governor?" That one question shocked everyone, even my own family. This story isn't about politics. It's about being left behind and coming back stronger than anyone ever thought. Have you ever grown up in a house where the pictures on the wall never changed? Where the only smiles framed in glass belonged to someone else? Yeah, that was my house. I'm Maya. And growing up, I was never the favorite. That title? It belonged to my little sister, Claire. Claire was everything a parent could ask for. Pageant queen by 9. Student body president by 14. Full ride to Princeton before she even turned 18. She was the kind of daughter they bragged about in grocery stores. While I waited in the car, I was the other one. The one who asked too many questions. The one who read too much, spoke too loudly, and dreamed way too big. My mom used to say I had a wild head. My dad had a better line. Maya's gonna end up waiting tables, while Claire changes the world. Funny thing is, I actually liked waiting tables. At least strangers tipped me when I did something right. At home? Even breathing felt like a mistake. Claire would walk into a room and it lit up. When I entered, my dad would glance up from the TV and say, "You're still here?" You know that feeling when your presence feels like background noise? That's what I was. I remember once, I won a local essay contest. I was 14. The theme was what America means to me. I stayed up 3 nights writing it by hand, pouring every part of myself onto that paper. I ran home with the certificate. Mom was baking. Claire was trying on a new dress. I held it up, smiling, "Look. I won." Mom didn't even turn around. Just said, "Don't wave paper near the food." Claire got a bouquet of roses for her spelling bee. I got silence. After a while, you start asking yourself, is it me? Am I just not enough? But I wasn't broken. I wasn't bitter. Not yet. I just kept writing. I kept asking questions. Reading old speeches. Highlighting every woman who was ever told you don't belong here. I didn't know where it would lead. But I knew. I couldn't stay in a house where I was a stranger with the same last name. You know what the hardest part was? It wasn't the insults. It was being invisible. I could be sitting at the table, right next to them, and still feel 1,000 miles away. Sometimes I'd lie awake at night, wondering if they'd notice if I disappeared. Other nights, I dreamed of a different future. One where my name meant something. Where my voice carried more weight than their silence. People say every family has a golden child. What they don't talk about is the shadow the other child grows up in. But shadows don't last forever. Because here's the thing. What if your family believes your story's already over? But it's just beginning? It wasn't a dramatic exit. There was no screaming, no slammed door. Just the quiet kind of pain that builds until it breaks. I was 20. Dinner had just ended. Claire was talking about her internship in DC, the whole table lit up like Christmas. Dad raised his glass and said, "One daughter making us proud." And then he looked at me and said nothing. Nothing. Just that pause. That hollow space where a father's love should be. I don't know what snapped in me that night. Maybe it wasn't one moment, maybe it was all of them piled on top of each other. But I stood up, walked to my room, and started packing a bag. Just one. A pair of jeans. A hoodie. My journal, the one that held more of my truth than my family ever did. No goodbye. No one followed me. No one asked where I was going. It's strange how silence can feel heavier than any goodbye. I walked out the front door. And I swear, the air felt lighter outside that house. Colder. But lighter. I didn't have a plan. No job. No money. No friend's couch already promised. All I had was this fire inside me. The kind you can't name, but you know it's there. The kind that refuses to go out, no matter how long you've been standing in the dark. The first few nights, I slept on a park bench near 14th Street. I hugged my backpack like it was a shield. I pretended I was just between places. But inside, I was terrified. The shame. The doubt. The ache of not being missed. I found a part-time night job at a diner. 12-hour shifts. Coffee burns on my hands. But at least I earned enough to buy a second hoodie and a sandwich that wasn't stolen. Days were harder. No sleep. No safety. So I hid in the one place I felt invisible, but safe. The public library. It became my shelter. My world. I'd sleep between the history section and biographies. One afternoon, I saw a flyer taped near the water fountain. Volunteers needed, Southside Community Center. I didn't think. I just showed up. They gave me a broom, and then later, a clipboard. And then, one day, a voice. Can you help us organize a local petition drive? That was the first time someone asked me to lead anything. Not obey. Not follow. Lead. Week by week. I started seeing things I'd only read about in books, real people, real policies, real change. It wasn't politics on TV. It was politics on the street. In broken streetlights. In housing forms no one could read. In kids who couldn't afford lunch. And I realized. It wasn't power I was chasing. It was purpose. That night, back at the shelter, I opened my journal and wrote 4 words in bold letters. They don't see me. Then underlined it. Twice. But I wasn't writing it for them anymore. I was writing it for the girl on that bench. The one who walked away from everything. Just to find something real. I didn't know what would come next. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally walking towards something. Not running away. They say blood is thicker than water. But silence? Silence is thicker than both. For almost 8 years, I lived like I didn't have a last name. No phone calls. No birthday messages. Not even a forwarded Christmas card. And maybe that hurt at first. But over time, the absence became my freedom. I worked during the day, diners, warehouses, mailrooms. At night, I studied. Community college first. Then a state school. I applied for every scholarship I could find. Some I made up just to try. Sometimes I'd sleep in stairwells between night classes. Sometimes I'd cry in bathroom stalls during breaks. But I never let anyone see the cracks. Because when the world sees a girl alone, it assumes she's either weak or lost. I refused to be either. At 26, I got my first full-time position. A junior public policy assistant at a local housing board. I was still the girl who brought her own lunch in a plastic grocery bag. But now I had a badge that said staff. And slowly, I stopped surviving. And started building. One coffee meeting at a time. One policy paper at a time. One city hall hearing at a time. People began to notice me, not because I was loud, but because I listened when no one else did. I wasn't there for power. I was there because I knew what it felt like to be invisible. And I didn't want anyone else to feel that way. At 29, I was approached by a local civic group. They said, "You should run. We need someone like you." I laughed. Me? Run for office? I didn't even have family who'd show up to vote. But I did it anyway. I printed flyers in my bedroom. Knocked on doors till my knuckles bled. Spoke at grocery stores, basketball courts, under leaking roofs. And one night, a stranger told me, "I'm voting for you, because you talk like you've lived what we live." That night, I cried. But for the first time, they were proud tears. Election day came. And I won. By 438 votes. Not a landslide. But enough to walk into that office with my head high. Enough to put my name, Maya Thompson, on a city sign for the first time. My face started showing up in the local newspaper. Then on podcasts. Then in small TV interviews. I remember the first time someone recognized me at a bus stop. She whispered, "Aren't you that new rep?" And I smiled, because for years, I was the girl no one ever saw. And through it all, my phone stayed silent. Not one word from home. Not a "we're proud of you." Not even a "how are you?" But I stopped waiting. Because somewhere along the way, I realized I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their name. I was building something stronger. My own name. My own voice. And it was being heard louder than I ever imagined. Sometimes, when people asked me where I came from, I'd just say, "Nowhere special." But the truth? I came from a place where I was told I'd fail. And I turned that silence into strength. They say blood is thicker than water. But silence? Silence is thicker than both. For almost 8 years, I lived like I didn't have a last name. No phone calls. No birthday messages. Not even a forwarded Christmas card. And maybe that hurt at first. But over time, the absence became my freedom. I worked during the day, diners, warehouses, mailrooms. At night, I studied. Community college first. Then a state school. I applied for every scholarship I could find. Some I made up just to try. Sometimes I'd sleep in stairwells between night classes. Sometimes I'd cry in bathroom stalls during breaks. But I never let anyone see the cracks. Because when the world sees a girl alone, it assumes she's either weak or lost. I refused to be either. At 26, I got my first full-time position. A junior public policy assistant at a local housing board. I was still the girl who brought her own lunch in a plastic grocery bag. But now I had a badge that said staff. And slowly, I stopped surviving and started building. One coffee meeting at a time. One policy paper at a time. One city hall hearing at a time. People began to notice me, not because I was loud, but because I listened when no one else did. I wasn't there for power. I was there because I knew what it felt like to be invisible. And I didn't want anyone else to feel that way. At 29, I was approached by a local civic group. They said, "You should run. We need someone like you." I laughed. Me? Run for office? I didn't even have family who'd show up to vote. But I did it anyway. I printed flyers in my bedroom. Knocked on doors till my knuckles bled. Spoke at grocery stores, basketball courts, under leaking roofs. And one night, a stranger told me, "I'm voting for you, because you talk like you've lived what we live." That night, I cried. But for the first time, they were proud tears. Election day came. And I won. By 438 votes. Not a landslide. But enough to walk into that office with my head high. Enough to put my name, Maya Thompson, on a city sign for the first time. My face started showing up in the local newspaper. Then on podcasts. then in small TV interviews. I remember the first time someone recognized me at a bus stop. She whispered, "Aren't you that new rep?" And I smiled, because for years, I was the girl no one ever saw. And through it all, my phone stayed silent. Not one word from home. Not a "we're proud of you." Not even a "how are you?" But I stopped waiting. Because somewhere along the way, I realized I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their name. I was building something stronger. My own name. My own voice. And it was being heard louder than I ever imagined. Sometimes, when people asked me where I came from, I'd just say, "Nowhere special." But the truth? I came from a place where I was told I'd fail. And I turned that silence into strength. It was a Thursday. I was buried under a pile of zoning reports, prepping for a transportation bill vote. Just another day on the job, meetings, paperwork, handshakes. Then my assistant, Lila, knocked lightly on the door. She never knocks unless it's serious. Maya, she said, hesitating. "There's a legal request from the district court." I raised an eyebrow. "About what?" She stepped in, lips pressed. "It's a character appearance request. For a financial fraud case." I took the envelope, not thinking much. Just another name, another case. Until I read it. Claire Thompson. I froze. Claire? My sister. The golden girl. The family's pride. Charged with financial fraud? I hadn't heard her name spoken in years, not in rooms I entered, not even in my own thoughts. We were ghosts to each other. And now suddenly, we were in the same state, the same courtroom? I sat down slowly. My hands trembled just a little. She didn't reach out. Didn't write. Didn't even warn me. But there her name was, black ink on crisp white paper, staring me in the face. According to the documents, she'd been living in a private neighborhood just 20 minutes from the capital. And yet, in all these years, we never crossed paths. Until now. The request wasn't for me to speak on her behalf. No. It was stranger than that. The court had requested me, as a representative of the state. A public official. A neutral voice to help determine Claire's character, based on our shared past. That irony? It hit hard. The girl they said would wait tables was now being asked to stand in judgment. Of the one they said would change the world. I stared out my office window for a long time. You'd think I'd feel joy. Vindication. Even a little bit of revenge. But what I felt was more complicated. Sadness. Not for her. But for the little girl I used to be. The one who just wanted to sit at the same table and feel equal. Now here I was. In a room she couldn't control, with power she never gave me. I picked up the court file again. Inside, there were witness statements. A list of victims. Misused funds. Names. Numbers. It wasn't just a mistake. It was deliberate. Calculated. I recognized the pattern. Charm. Pressure. Smile your way past the rules. I'd seen it in our childhood, but now, it was criminal. That night, I went home and sat in silence. For years, I thought the worst thing I'd ever feel was rejection. Turns out, the worst thing is watching someone you once looked up to become someone you can't recognize. And yet, this wasn't about Claire anymore. This was about the law. The truth. And the woman I'd become. I didn't know what I'd say in court. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't that forgotten girl in the background anymore. Now, I was the one being asked to speak. And the whole room would listen. The courtroom smelled like old wood and cheap coffee. It wasn't my first time in one. I'd spoken before city councils, testified in Senate chambers, even debated in front of national press. But this? This felt different. This wasn't policy. This was personal. I arrived early. Wore a simple navy suit. No designer label. No entourage. Just me, and the color of the state seal across my chest. Blue. Strong. Official. I sat quietly at the left side of the courtroom, my badge tucked in my coat pocket. Eyes forward. Back straight. Calm. Composed. Until the door opened. She walked in like a storm that had lost its wind. Claire. Her hair was messy, pulled back like she hadn't had time to fix it. Her blazer wrinkled. Eyes hollow, but still trying to pretend they held power. The same girl who once walked hallways like runways, now just trying not to fall apart. She saw me. And froze. For a moment, her jaw clenched, not in anger, but recognition. Maybe shame. Maybe fear. Then her lawyer nudged her gently forward. He didn't look at me. Not once. The bailiff called the court to order. Everyone stood. Then the judge walked in, a tall woman with short white hair and the kind of stare that made silence fall heavy. She scanned the courtroom, shuffled some papers. Then looked up and paused. Right at me. Wait, she said slowly, adjusting her glasses. You're the governor? I stood up. Straight spine. Quiet confidence. Yes, Your Honor, I said clearly. The room rippled. Gasps. Chairs creaked. Even the stenographer looked up. And Claire? She turned pale. The kind of pale that drains every ounce of control from a face. For years, she was the one introduced at every event. The one wearing crowns, medals, honors. I was the shadow behind her. And now, in the most public room of justice, my name carried the weight. Not hers. The judge leaned forward. I wasn't aware the state would be represented by the governor herself. I replied, steady. I requested to represent the state in this particular matter, Your Honor. Given personal history. A long pause. She nodded. Very well. Claire wouldn't meet my eyes. She looked down at her hands, trembling slightly. And in that moment, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I felt clarity. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about who won the childhood spotlight. This was about truth. Responsibility. Justice. The court began reading the charges. Wire fraud. Misuse of public donations. Document forgery. I sat still, every word landing like a drumbeat. Not because it surprised me, but because it confirmed what I already knew. The truth always comes back. Eventually. When asked to speak, I stood at the witness podium. Claire glanced up once. Her eyes searched my face, like she was still hoping I might save her. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I wasn't the rebel. I was the woman who walked out with nothing and returned with everything she built herself. And as I stood there, heart steady, voice unwavering, I realized this wasn't the end of her story, but it was the beginning of mine. Being told, finally, in full volume. They asked me if I had a statement for the court. I stood, cleared my throat, and looked around the room, full of reporters, officers, court clerks, and Claire. She kept her eyes low. For a second, I saw the little girl I used to follow through our house, begging to be noticed. The one who once taught me how to braid my hair. The one who also told me I'd never be enough. But now, she was the one waiting to be heard. I didn't come here to punish her. I wasn't here to throw stones. I took a deep breath. Let the silence settle around me. Then I spoke, not as her sister, but as someone who had been silenced too long. Your Honor, I said, voice steady, I stand here today not out of anger, but out of truth. I was once told, by my own family, that I would never matter. That my ideas, my voice, my path, were just noise. But every voice matters, when it's given a chance. Every life, no matter how small or overlooked, has value. I'm living proof. I didn't come here to shame anyone. I came to stand for the people who've been dismissed, just like I once was. Because justice isn't about vengeance. It's about reflection. And responsibility. I hope this courtroom becomes not just a place of judgment, but a turning point. Because I've found my second chance. And I hope Claire finds hers too. When I sat down, the judge nodded quietly. There was no applause. No dramatic music. Just a soft kind of silence. Like the room itself was exhaling something heavy. After the hearing, I walked out quietly through the side hallway. My badge still tucked in my coat, my heels echoing on the marble floor. And then, I heard footsteps behind me. Maya. I turned. It was Claire. She stood there, clutching her purse like it was the only thing holding her together. Her voice was barely a whisper. Can we talk? For a moment, I froze. All those years. All that silence. And now, here she was. But something in her eyes had changed. The pride was gone. The mask was cracked. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply looked at her and said, gently but firmly, I hope you find your second chance, Claire. I found mine. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. Because closure isn't loud. It's not made of courtroom gasps or dramatic exits. It's made of quiet strength. Of knowing you showed up as the person you chose to become, not the one they said you'd be. In that moment, I wasn't the little girl who begged to be seen. I was the woman who walked into a courtroom with her name, her truth, and her peace. And sometimes, that's more powerful than revenge could ever be. They said I'd never matter. That my voice was too loud, or not enough. That I wasn't the daughter worth betting on. But life doesn't ask for permission to bloom. It just needs one seed, and a little courage. So to every woman who's ever been told she's too much or not enough, remember this. Your past does not get to decide your future. You do. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to become the version of me they said could never exist. And now? I walk into every room. With my head high. And my name known.